Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome folks, Day of the Hungry Gamer is back with another how to play video. And today we are learning how to play Theurgy from the Ministry of Meeples and designed by Oliver Josiah and Charlotte Dowling. Now, before I jump in, I do have a couple things to point out. One is you do want to turn on your Klingon subtitles because if there are any design changes after this video is published, that's where you'll find any of those corrections. And additionally, I do need to point out that this is still in the prototype phase. All of the art is actually early rough drafts and actually lower res than it will actually be. All of the art on the miracle cards, which we will be seeing later on, is just placeholder. Each card will have its own unique art. And additionally, you'll notice that there are lots of generic pieces like cubes and generic little temples here, and those will be changing as well. So do keep that in mind as you watch this how to play video. So what Theurgy is it is a game for 1 to 6 players in which you take on the role of an almost forgotten god that is striving to reassert your dominance through your 2 remaining acolytes in a world that is increasingly reliant on science, and by science I mean more alchemy than anything else. And throughout the game you'll be competing with the other gods around the table in order to assert your dominance and win the game. Now, before I talk about how to win the game, let's talk about setting the game up. And what I have out here is all the components that you will possibly need for a 2-player game. Each player will have 2 meeples, an action selection pawn, a variety of follower tokens, in this case cubes, and faith markers, which are these cardboard chits here. And then finally, each player will have a variety of temples as well, all in their own color. In addition to that, you will need the non-believer tokens, in this case the gray cubes, and skeptic tokens, which are like the faith tokens, except for the non-believers, those who believe in science, not in the gods, and those are both the grays. Then you will collect all of the monster tokens and monster cards. Those are these cards right here. We'll learn about these later, and these are the monster tokens, and these clear discs are part of that as well. You'll have 6 different player boards, 1 for each of the different gods in the game that you are able to play. And again, as you can expect, each player will take 1 of them, and each of the gods operates mostly exactly the same, except each god does have a slightly different, unique power that they have. And I will note that some of the powers listed on these right now are previous versions and have since changed, Lutraz being one of them. In this case, I've selected Lutraz, which is the red, and Calyrex, which is the blue. Then you'll need to claim all of your objective cards, and you'll want to go through and only use the ones that correlate with the number of players you have in your game. So in this case, I'd be looking for all the ones that say 2 players on them, and I would keep those in the game, and all the ones that have higher numbers, such as these 4 to 6s, I would simply return to the box. Next, what I will do is I will take all of the miracle cards here. Each player is going to wind up getting 3 of these, but before we do that, we do need to set up the city events. And for that, you'll take your 3, possibly more depending on the Kickstarter capital event cards, and depending on the number of players you have, you will select 1 or 2 of them to be included in the game. In this case, as I'm setting up a 2-player game, I would randomly select 2 of these and then return the other to the box. The next thing that you'll do is you'll take your miracle deck and divide it into 4 roughly even stacks. Then, depending on the player count, you will then shuffle in your 2 capital event cards into different portions of this deck. If you're playing a 2-player game, you shuffle it into your second fourth and into your bottom fourth of the deck. And then you simply restack your deck back in the same orientation that it was. So I've shuffled in my card to there. I take the third part, put it on top of that. I then shuffle in my card to the B section, and I put that back on top. And then I finish by putting the A on top of that, and you've now created your event and miracle deck. Once you've completed that, you're ready to move on to actually setting up your board for the game. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to separate out your capital tile and place that in the center of the board. Then you will take 1 of each of the 6 remaining types of tiles, and you will stack those up, like so. Once you've done that, you can stack all the remaining tiles up and set them to the side for just a moment. You will take your 6 tiles, and then you will shuffle those up, and you will place them out around your capital, starting at the top position, like so. Then you'll take the rest of your tiles, and you will shuffle those up as well, and once you have done that, you're going to place them out around your middle ring here, like so. Once you've done that, you do a quick check to make sure that you do not in any place have 3 of the same type of tiles connected to each other, as we do here with the 3 mines are all connected. If that is the case, you simply swap the tile on the inner ring with another tile on the inner ring, as shown by this chart here. In this case, I would be switching the mine with the forest, like so. Once that's finished, you're ready to put the non-believers out onto the map. To start out, we'll place our skeptic tokens. You're going to place 2 of them on the capital, and then 1 on every single tile in this inner ring, like so. Once that's complete, you're going to place out some non-believer skeptical followers. To do that, you're going to place 8 in the capital, you will place 5 in every tile in the inner ring, and then around the outer ring, you will place 3 in every outer ring tile, like so. Then you're going to place your acolytes and your acolytes' followers out onto the board. And in the 2 to 3 player game, this means each player will occupy a single hex tile directly across from another one. And each player will then select one hex tile that is only touching 3 other hex tiles. For example, this would be acceptable as it only touches these 3, while this would not be acceptable as it touches 1, 2, 3, and 4. You then place your acolytes out on the tiles directly opposite from each other. Then you remove the gray non-believers from those tiles. You then place 3 of your own followers on that tile, as your acolyte has already converted those non-believers into believers in your divine will. Next, you'll deal each player 3 miracle cards, and then 2 objective cards, and each player will select a single objective from their 2. Now, I will also point out now that in the advanced setup of the game, you actually would already have your objectives before you've selected your gods, thus allowing you to look at the objectives that you have and then select which gods you would like to play based on that. However, for the purposes of this video, I've done it in this order as it is a little bit simpler to understand. Each player will then select one of their objectives, and I'll explain the importance of the objectives in just a moment. However, what you'll notice is at the bottom it tells you what it is that you have to do to complete your objective. In this case here, all temples and ruins must be built in market towns, mines, and fishing villages. Or the other option would be at least 3 of your temples must be built in the inner ring. Then each player would choose which one of the 2 that they would like, so we will assume that blue is going to select this one right here. The other one would then be removed from the game. And then red would have an option of these 2. You have to have at least one of your followers, or cubes, in the hexes where your opponents have a temple, or at least one of their temples must not be adjacent to any other temple. And again, red can make their choice, and we'll assume that red will select this one, and then the other one is removed from the game. Then you will place a single faith token on one of the vertexes next to one of the hexes in which you already have control. And as a general tip, you want to place that on a vertex of 3 different hexes, not on one, only next to 2. After that, you'll place the anomaly token on the capital, and then finally you will place out your monster cards next to the board. And then on each one, you'll place the monster token in case this monster gets drafted into the game. And your final setup should look something like this. Now that that's done, we are ready to actually start the game. What you're going to need to do to win the game is you're going to need to build a certain number of temples depending on the player count and depending on the exact requirements you're able to fulfill with the building of your temple. And you'll see looking at the image on the screen now, depending on the number of players you have, that will determine how many temples that you need. So talking about the 2-player game, you'll need to have built 7 of your temples out on the board, and one of those 7 must be in the capital, and that will win you the game. Additionally, you can have built 8 of your temples anywhere on the board. However, you must also have fulfilled your objective for the game. And I will note that the objective must be true when you have built that 8th temple. The objective is not something that you complete and then it is done. It has to be true when you build that final temple. Or barring that, in the 2-player game, you can simply build 9 temples and you will win the game immediately. First, we will talk about taking the pilgrimage action. So the first thing you would do is you would move your pawn from one of the other 3 locations onto the pilgrimage action. And again, another reminder, you cannot take the same action twice in a row on any given turn. And what this is going to allow you to do, it's going to allow you to do a few things. One, it's going to allow you to move your acolytes to different hexes around the board. It will allow you to move your followers to different hexes around the board. It will allow you to convert followers of either another faith or the skeptical non-believers to your faith, or it will allow you to fight monsters should they be somewhere out on the board. For the sake of argument, we will put a monster right here. What will happen is that both of your meeples will be allowed to move one hex. In the case of Kellerix, the blue god here, its special power is it is actually allowed to move 2 hexes, but for the sake of this argument, we will only move them 1. So each of your meeples is allowed to move 1 hex, like so. And then either before or after they move, they can either convert a follower of another faith to their faith. So as this meeple has come here, I could convert a non-believer into a believer, or if I wanted, I could convert a follower of another faith into a follower of my faith. However, if the other god whose follower I'm attempting to convert has an acolyte in the same hex, that action is unavailable to you. However, in this case, it is no problem for me to do that. It is also important to note that had I chosen to do so, I could have converted a follower here and then moved to another hex. With regards to fighting monsters, when you move into a hex with a monster, as we have this monster right here, you can simply kill the monster. Again, you are unable to kill the monster if the player who controls the monster has one of their acolytes already there. In some cases, monsters are considered legendary monsters, and they actually require you to have both of your acolytes there at the same time in order to kill them, but we will talk about that when we get to summoning monsters a little bit later on. In addition to moving your meeples, you're also able to move your followers, and each of your followers is able to move a single hex in any direction that you choose. The only limitation to this is you cannot move a brand new follower. In other words, had I come here and converted this non-believer into a believer, I could not then move that same new follower to another location. The next action we'll talk about is called spreading the word. And this is perhaps the most important yet fastest of all of the actions that you can take. It's very simple. You take one of your faith tokens and you place it on any vertex of any hex in which you have at least one cube, in which you have at least one of your colored followers on that hex. In other words, I could place it here, I could place it here, I could place it over here, or I could place it somewhere where I do not have an acolyte. For example, I could place one right here. You'll notice that in this case, red only has one follower compared to all of these different non-believers. However, since they have at least one, they could place one of their faith tokens on their turn as well. It is also possible to replace faith tokens of other players with this action. So for example, if blue were to take the spread the word action, and they wanted to replace reds here, they could do so as long as in all of the surrounding hexes, they have more followers than red does. In this case, blue has 3 to red's 1. They would then be able to replace this with one of their own faith tokens, like so. However, had the board looked like this, because there are more red followers than there are blue followers in these 3 hexes, this faith token would be safe and could not be replaced by blue. However, blue could place a faith token right here if they so chose. It is also important to note that every time you take the spread the word action, you do only get to place 1 faith token out on the board. You do not get to place 1 per meeple. The next action is called the divine intervention. And this is where you, as the god, will be performing miracles and bringing monsters out into the realm to demonstrate your power. And we'll start off with performing a miracle. When you perform a miracle, a couple of things are going to happen. First, you're going to select which of your acolytes will be performing the miracle. The location is important, because any time an acolyte performs a miracle, all skeptic tokens on the hex where they are present are immediately removed, as it's very hard to be skeptical of the gods when you literally are seeing a miracle performed in front of you. The same is going to happen should a monster ever be summoned in a hex. It remains hard to be skeptical of the supernatural when you are seeing a monster right in front of your very own eyes. When you perform your miracle and you've selected your location, you simply play one of the cards from your hand. And each of the cards will tell you exactly what it is that they do on the card, and there is a great variety in what it is that they're able to do. After you have performed your miracle, you will discard your miracle, and you also have the option to discard any other miracles out of your hand that you are not interested in holding on to, and then drawing back up to 3 miracles as soon as you are done. Now this is also important because if at any time you are replacing your miracles from the miracle deck and you draw a capital event, that event will immediately happen. So in this case, immediately convert all cubes in the capital to gray. And in our example that we have right here, that means that these 2 blues would immediately be turned into gray tokens. Then after the event is complete, the player who drew it would be able to draw another miracle to fill their hand back up to 3 miracles. The other thing that you're able to do is you are able to summon a monster. And let's look at how that works right now. Now, when you summon a monster, it's very simple. You're simply allowed to draft whichever of the 3 monsters currently visible you would like to place into the game. And you will see down at the bottom, it tells you exactly what each of the monsters does. In addition to that, it will tell you where it is that the monster has to be summoned to, as each monster is specific to a certain type of location. In addition to that, you'll see a variety of symbols on the right side. What these symbols mean are, if there's a lightning bolt, that means every time there's a divine intervention, they get to activate their ability, and this does include the first time that they are summoned. If there is a hex with the struck through circle inside of it, that means that once they are placed on the board, they do not move. Should there be a hex with an arrow to another hex, that means every time a divine intervention is activated, the monster will move to an adjacent hex. And then above, that means there is a passive ability of some sort that this monster provides. In this case, the nymph allows you to ignore the effects of monsters and miracles on that particular hex. And as a reminder, anytime you place a monster out onto the board, all skeptic tokens are removed from that space. Again, it is very hard to be skeptical of the supernatural when you are seeing it with your own eyes. After a monster has been drafted, you immediately place 1 token on each monster that has not been drafted. If at any time you would have to place a 3rd token on a monster, that monster is immediately discarded and replaced with the top one from the deck. There are also several legendary monsters in the game, such as the dragon here, and you will know it is a legendary because it takes 2 meeples in order to kill the monster. As a reminder, all that has to be done to kill a monster is the player must take a pilgrimage action, and while their acolyte is in the same hex as a monster, they simply choose to kill the monster rather than converting any followers. Also, as a reminder, if the player controlling the monster has their acolyte there, then that monster is protected. The final action that you can take is called the Test the Faith. And this is perhaps the most important action of the game, as this is how you build your temples. The way the Test the Faith works is the active player will move the anomaly token to the hex that they are testing the faith on. And as a reminder, the anomaly token starts out on the capital. Once it is there, it represents some kind of supernatural anomaly, which is testing the faith of all of the people in that district. And at the end of the day, one faith will have proven to be the strongest, and a new temple will be erected to honor them. And this is where the faith tokens that you've been placing out on the board through your spread the word tokens come into play. When the test of faith action has been taken, you'll be converting cubes based on the difference in number of faith tokens from one color to another. And this is where I should point out that the skeptic tokens, those are the equivalent of faith tokens for the non-believers. So in this case, we have 3 faith tokens for Kellerix, or the blue god, 2 for Lutraz, the red god, and then 1 for the skeptics. So starting with blue, we look at the difference between blue and gray, which is 2. There are 2 more blue faith tokens than gray. So immediately, 2 of those non-believers are converted to believers. Then we see that there are 2 red faith tokens for a difference of 1 between red and gray. So 1 of the grays is converted to red. Then we look at the difference between blue and red, the difference being 1, so 1 of the red followers is converted to a blue follower. This leaves us with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blue, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red, and 1, 2, 3, 4 gray. The god with the most followers then gets to build their temple on the hex. After a temple has been built, you then place a new skeptic token in every surrounding hex that does not have an acolyte in it. So in this case, it would be here, 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 none there because of the acolyte, here, and none here, again, because there is an acolyte. And these new skeptic tokens are representing people are becoming skeptical of religion because has been a change in the official religion of the neighboring region. Now, while you cannot test the faith in a single hex where the anomaly is, once that anomaly has been moved somewhere else, you can test the faith in a location again. And should something happen later on in the game where after testing the faith, a different faction has more followers, the old temple will be torn down and destroyed, and a new temple will be built right on top of the ruins. Ruined temples count as half a point when it comes to calculating victory conditions. I will also note that should it happen that there are more gray followers than any other, then after the faith has been tested, the current temple would be torn down and no new temple would be built to replace it. And so that's how Theurgy is played. You'll be taking rotating turns, converting new followers to your faith, summoning monsters, performing miracles, and so on until one player has built enough temples for which they have won the game and become accepted as the religion of the land. I will say there is also a solo variant that is being worked on. And what this is it is a way to include AIs in the game, allowing you to play by yourself against one or more AI, or to add an AI to a less than max player count game. However, I will allow you to learn that one on your own. There you have it, folks. That is the basics of how to play Theurgy. As always, if you're interested in knowing my thoughts on the game, you can check out one of my preview videos. There are links to those in the description. As always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.